morning, it's March 3rd. It's to my liberal friends. Well, if you weren't paying attention, you'd not notice that a major bombshell went off in foreign policy last week. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky came to Washington to meet with President Trump. And for the past few years, he's been heralded as a great defender of democracy as he led his nation in a war against a Russian invasion. He had spoken to Congress, received a standing ovation, and the media fawned all over him. He felt he could command any negotiation, he would have the upper hand. Well, he guessed wrong when he entered the Oval Office to meet with President Trump and Vice President Vance. In Zelensky's mind, it was another opportunity to press the flesh and get more financial and military support from the United States. But in that moment in time, he made the mistake of crossing a line with his greatest ally, calling into question before the assembled press whether President Trump really understood about what the war was about and whether the United States was in a position to negotiate a peace agreement. The Ukrainian leader, who at times rolled his eyes and crossed his arms in defiance during the fiery bilateral meeting, either fundamentally misunderstood or entirely miscalculated the current moment in American politics. His alliance with the United States, if not the fate of his country, became imperiled. And this was not Joe Biden sitting across from him. He was not going to be a scripted meeting where the two national leaders smiled before the media and promised to work together to defeat a common enemy. Zelensky had failed to realize that last November, the political situation in the United States had dramatically shifted. He failed to understand the resolve that President Trump had in trying to end the war and basically to end the stream of funds from the United States to Ukraine. Trump has been calling for the end of the war and promised to bring it to an end as soon as possible. Now, earlier, Trump had met with French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. During their separate visits, both had commended Trump for beginning the process of peace talks. But Zelensky was in his own bubble. He felt the American people were behind him and he could push the envelope. And according to reports, even Joe Biden became irritated with him, but remained in lockstep with Zelensky. Biden often said, quote, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, end quote, basically pledging his support as long as it takes. But Trump was not willing to spend billions after billions to fund a war that was at a stalemate. In the Oval Office Friday, Trump made his position explicit by proclaiming that in the conflict, quote, I'm in the middle, and I'm for both Ukraine and Russia. The president also previously ruled out what Zelensky wants most, a security guarantee backed by the U.S. This would be Zelensky's backdoor into NATO, something he desperately wants, and has been rejected by Biden and now by Trump. Zelensky wanted some form of understanding that the U.S. troops would engage if the peace agreement broke down. Trump argued, however, that the mineral deals would be just as good. We're going to be there working over there. We'll be on the land, and you know what? That's sort of automatic security, Trump said, because nobody's going to be messing around with our people when we're there. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said publicly that the agreement was as good as done and insisted that all that was required were the signatures. Apparently, Zelensky did not get that message. He angered Trump, and he also angered his biggest Republican supporter in the Senate, Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina. According to Graham, quote, he either needs to resign and send somebody over here that can do business with, or he needs to change, end quote. If Zelensky thought he was going to get a security commitment from Trump that might require U.S. military involvement, he was badly mistaken. Now let's get real. Zelensky could have signed that deal in Kiev, or he could have signed it in Munich. He wanted a meeting in the White House with Trump. Now, later on we hear, and we've known for some time, he was being advised by Susan Rice, Tony Blinken, Victoria Nuland, and Alexander Vindman, all Biden and Obama people he'd been working with in the previous administration. And they convinced him he had the upper hand with the deal being announced in advance, and he should make the security demands. They and he were wrong, and obviously don't know how to read Trump. With Biden, this may have worked, but it backfired badly with Trump. I want to be up front. I want Ukraine to prevail in this war with Russia. Vladimir Putin was clearly the aggressor of this war, but it cannot go on forever, and U.S. tax dollars cannot be an endless spigot for Ukraine. The level of corruption in Ukraine remains very high. Transparency International ranked Ukraine 104 out of 189 countries in its corruption index. To better understand this, Denmark was the least corrupt, Germany was 9th, even Estonia, another former Soviet republic, was ranked 12th. Zelensky and his government have used the war with Russians to institute martial law, and that means no elections can be held under the law. It's also allowed them to suspend the obligation for public servants to declare their assets, and that information being available to the public. And there's a lot of questions about where some of the U.S. money's been going. Well, over the weekend, European leaders have stepped up and tried to formulate a deal. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who said Zelensky should have taken the deal with the U.S., met with the Ukrainian president and said European countries would have to step up and share the burden. He hinted they would have to add some security guarantees that might even include boots on the ground. And that's a positive sign, with Europeans becoming more invested in the overall security of Europe. Zelensky had hinted that he could still be willing to sign the rare earth minerals deal. Now, I think a deal can still be reached, and negotiations should take place behind closed doors. Zelensky might not be the person to get a deal done, and any insistence that the U.S. give him some ironclad security assurance will never be on the table. For everyone who's been cheering Ukraine on in this war, and I've been one, are you willing to send your husbands and sons to fight in Ukraine? If you're not, then you have to acknowledge that Trump has blocked that request, and it was never and never will be on the table. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.